Dear Boss, The Double Event, and the Night Jack the Ripper Became a Legend. Part 2. Jack the Ripper, the killer who vanished. The night London lost its mind. So imagine you're a police officer in London. You've already got 2 brutal murders on your hands. The newspapers are calling you incompetent. The public is terrified. Then, the killer strikes again. Actually, scratch that. He strikes twice. On the same night. And suddenly everyone realizes, this isn't just a murderer anymore. This is a serial killer. By late September 1888, Whitechapel wasn't sleeping anymore. People still filled the streets after dark, but the mood had changed. Conversations stopped when strangers walked by. Women glanced over their shoulders every few seconds. Men carried walking sticks, not because they looked fashionable, but because they hoped they might work as weapons. Every shadow looked suspicious. Every alley looked like a trap. Meanwhile, the Metropolitan Police were under enormous pressure. Newspapers accused them of failing to protect the public. Political leaders demanded answers. Detectives interviewed hundreds of people. Some officers worked around the clock. But every morning, the investigation seemed to be exactly where it had started. Nowhere. Then, the night of September 30th, 1888, arrived. It would become one of the most infamous nights in criminal history. Historians now call it the double event. The first victim was Elizabeth Stride. She was 44 years old. Born in Sweden, she had once dreamed of building a better life in England. Instead, years of hardship had left her struggling to survive in Whitechapel. Just before 1 o'clock in the morning, several witnesses reported seeing her speaking with a man. Nobody paid much attention. People talked on street corners all the time. Minutes later, a cart driver named Louis Deemschutz turned into Dutfield's yard. His horse suddenly refused to move. At first he thought there was debris blocking the road. He climbed down carrying a small whip, then struck a match. The tiny flame revealed something lying on the ground. It was Elizabeth. Her throat had been cut. She was still warm. The killer had escaped only moments before. Imagine that. The murderer might have been standing in the darkness, watching everyone discover the body. Police rushed to the scene. Doctors examined Elizabeth. Something seemed different. Unlike the previous victims, she had not suffered the same extensive injuries. Detectives began wondering if the killer had been interrupted. Maybe the cart had arrived too soon. Maybe footsteps scared him away. Maybe someone accidentally saved countless minutes, without even realizing it. If that's true, the interruption didn't stop him. It simply delayed him. Because less than an hour later, another body was found. This time in Mitre Square, nearly a mile away. The victim was Catherine Eddowes. She was 46 years old. Earlier that evening, police had actually taken her into custody for public drunkenness. After she sobered up, they released her. One officer reportedly joked that she should go home and stay safe. Instead, she walked into history. At approximately 1:45 a.m., a police officer entered Mitre Square during his routine patrol. Everything seemed normal. He continued walking. About 15 minutes later, another officer entered the square. This time, Catherine's body was there. The killer had somehow committed the murder and escaped during the tiny window between patrols. Police couldn't believe it. How could someone disappear so quickly? The scene was horrifying. Doctors described injuries unlike anything many of them had seen before. The brutality shocked even experienced investigators. And now something became painfully obvious. The murderer wasn't slowing down. He was becoming more confident. The public panic exploded. Crowds gathered around crime scenes before sunrise. People whispered theories everywhere. Some blamed foreigners. Others suspected doctors, butchers, sailors, wealthy gentlemen. Even members of the royal family eventually became the subject of rumors. Almost everyone had a suspect. Nobody had evidence. Then, the investigation took an even stranger turn. On October 1st, a police officer discovered a blood-stained piece of Catherine Eddowes' apron in the doorway of an apartment building on Golston Street. Above it was a chalk message. Unfortunately, no one knows exactly what it said. The wording was copied down differently by different officers. And before daylight, The message was erased on the orders of Metropolitan Police Commissioner Sir Charles Warren, who feared it might trigger anti-Jewish riots. That decision has been debated ever since. Some investigators believe the writing could have been left by the killer. Others thought it had nothing to do with the murders. Either way, once it was wiped away, it was gone forever. Then, just when London thought things couldn't get stranger, a letter arrived. It was sent to the Central News Agency. It began with two simple words: "Dear Boss." The writer mocked the police, claimed responsibility for the murders, boasted that he would strike again, and signed the letter Jack the Ripper. Nobody had ever heard that name before. Now it was everywhere. Newspapers loved it. Readers couldn't get enough. Within days, the mysterious Whitechapel murderer had become Jack the Ripper. Was the letter genuine? Nobody knows. Many historians believe it was probably written by a journalist or someone seeking attention rather than the killer himself. But whether it was authentic or not, it changed history. Because names have power. The Whitechapel murderer sounded like a police report. Jack the Ripper sounded like a nightmare. Soon, police received hundreds of letters claiming to be from Jack. Most were obvious hoaxes. Some included bizarre drawings. Others threatened more violence. Detectives had to waste valuable time sorting through fake confessions while the real killer remained free. Meanwhile, the people of Whitechapel were living in constant fear. Mothers refused to let daughters leave home after sunset. Businesses closed early. Volunteer patrol groups formed. Men armed themselves with clubs, whistles, and whatever else they could find. Every unknown face became suspicious. Every stranger looked like he could be Jack. And that's the terrifying part. The killer didn't have to hide. He looked ordinary. He dressed like everyone else. He walked through the same crowded streets, bought food from the same shops, passed police officers on the sidewalk. For all anyone knows, a detective could have brushed shoulders with Jack the Ripper and never realized it. Because that's how monsters survive. Not by looking different. By looking completely normal. And unfortunately, the worst was still coming. Because one final murder would shock even hardened detectives and become one of the most infamous crime scenes in history. That's it for part 2. Keep an eye out for part 3. See you soon.